definitely a bit of a clickbaity title, but I think the topic itself is completely reasonable to discuss, and that it is interesting to really do an analysis of the Shadowlands patch into the expansion. So there has always been negativity within the Warcraft community, but lately, as a creator, I really noticed more than ever, people have been leaving comments on how they think the story is just completely messed up, how no one cares, how it doesn't fit WoW overall, and there has just been a lot of criticism, to say the least. So let me just take a constructive criticism approach to give you my thoughts on the current lore and how I feel about it, without pessimism and just spreading negativity for the sake of it. So, I first got introduced to the universe around Warcraft 2, but it was really Warcraft 3 that shaped my childhood. I played that game so much, and it really made me fall in love with the series and to keep up with the game for so long. I started World of Warcraft around Wrath of the Lich King, a bit earlier, around 2009 maybe, and I've really been in this lore game for quite a bit over a decade by this point, really around 15 years or so. Now, since forever, I really remember negativity around the Warcraft community. Some justified, some not, but really, most of it has been unjustified throughout the years. People have been saying that Doom is just around the corner for well over a decade. I remember when Mists of Pandaria was released and people said this was the end of Warcraft, Kung Fu Panda, this is a kid's game, and really, overall, from my memory, it was a pretty good expansion, not just gameplay-wise, but also lore-wise, and, well, a decade passed since then, and the game is still going. Additionally, I've also been a YouTuber for nearly a decade as well, so I have a kind of a unique perspective. I really followed the comments that people have been leaving throughout the multiple expansions since Cataclysm, Worlds of Draenor, and the various seasons and routes of the game. I also remember, since forever, people have been talking about how the game sucks, how it is bad, but I gotta say, to be completely honest now, I've seen more comments than ever on how people are saying that they're just done with the story, that they think Blizzard went way too far, and that they have completely destroyed the narrative, and overall, like, realistically, people have been quite pessimistic about the future of the game. Generally, the most common concerns are that the power scales are just all out of whack, that they just keep pulling villain after villain, and that we are now at like round 10 of it was actually this bad guy and not who you believed this entire time. The second most common concern is that the story just doesn't feel like it belongs to the Warcraft universe. A lot of people are saying how Shadowlands feels like a completely different setting, a completely different game, just with a few known characters such as Thrall and Jaina just like sprinkled in to make it feel like Warcraft. And the last concern is that people feel like they shouldn't have touched the afterlife, and by doing so they essentially messed up everything that happened before, destroying any sort of meaning and really lessening the impact of all the sacrifices and really all the important deeds that occurred throughout history. Well, to give you my thoughts and to be objective and completely honest, I actually agree with most of these concerns to quite a large extent, and I'm definitely worried about how things are ultimately going to turn out. I think it is a bit different in Shadowlands now, the criticism, than it was in the past. However, at the same time, I really don't think things are all that bleak as people are saying. Now, I'm not going to backtrack. I did say at the start of the expansion that Shadowlands had some of the best lore in over a decade, and honestly, I still stand behind that, but I really don't feel like Blizzard lived up to that since the release. Like, it was okay at the start, but right now it's definitely not the best lore in over a decade. I can agree with the power scale problem, but I'm not sure how much can really be done there. The game has really just been going for so long. Like, there's really only a few like very popular successful games that have been going on for 2 decades, and really they just gotta come up with new villains to just make it interesting. However, there is definitely an issue with us being like these Titan scale Sargeras type universe saving champions, and I think the story might be better if they just lessened our significance a bit. I'm not saying that we should just be random grunts like random foot soldiers, but I think there's definitely a sweet spot somewhere in the middle between a grunt and like a universe destroying saving champion. Now, my main problem with Shadowlands is that I think it really is possibly the most ambitious expansion they had ever done, but they really didn't deliver on it. Ultimately, I really believe they faltered quite a bit on the actual execution. Like, they had the idea, but they didn't really execute nearly as much as they should. I definitely understand the concern, and that is something I said at the start, is that going into the afterlife will definitely mess up every death that happened in the past, and it will make things lose a bit of their meaning. However, I do actually think like the expansion itself is actually a great idea. They took some of the best parts of the Warcraft history, the Lich King and like Death on Death, and they made a new expansion out of it and included a completely brand new concept. Then they sprinkled some light and void influence, and overall, I just gotta be completely honest, it is a great idea. However, at the same time, a big problem is they keep pushing some storylines that really feel either forced or just with like stupid conclusions. Like you feel kinda, I don't even know how to say it, you feel kinda stupid when you watch them, like really, this was it, you know, with characters such as Sylvanas, Tiranda, and just they keep dragging out some storylines that should have ended like 5 years ago. Now, I believe that Shadowlands actually started really well. I remember when the expansion was released, I felt my passion for WoW reignite after so many years, and I just couldn't wait to play the game, but I think that ran out of steam a lot quicker than I expected. 9.1 took forever to release, and the time it took didn't really justify the content that was released. I feel like 9.1 should have been around in March, April, maybe even February, and 9.2 should be released now in the summer, and I think that would have really helped the hype train to keep going, like it would actually keep all the interest. Now, I do understand the world situation and all that, but I wouldn't really say that is a complete excuse. I mean, you may have seen that guy that made a homemade Garrosh cinematic ultimately better than Blizzard themselves in like 2 weeks, if not less. So it's not just a complete excuse like the world situation itself. On the other hand, I don't want to be too harsh on Blizzard. I think people are also being quite a bit unreasonable as well. They keep saying that the story is just complete garbage and they ruined everything, but the reality is that we don't really know all that much more than we knew at the release. Other than Sylvanas betraying the jailer and a few other minor things, nothing significant really happened yet, and we still don't know who the first ones are, who the jailer is, and what does he ultimately want, like what is actually going to happen. Like we barely even know anything. We're really at a big crossroads where Blizzard could still salvage everything and pull out a good storyline, or they could do another Nazad ending that would really be quite damaging for World of Warcraft overall. Now, crossroads are fine, but I definitely understand the criticism when we have a crossroads that lasts for like, what, nearly a year. Speculation is, you know, fun and all, but let's be real, like the story is moving way too slow. We get like 5 minutes of story progression, wait 3 months, get another 2 minutes, and then we're left to speculate again and again. And ultimately, even with that little bit of information, we still don't know what is going on, who this guy is, what does he want, and really, at this point, we know like 10% more about the jailer than we did at release, which, while cool to keep the suspense, I think they went a bit too far and they just ended up killing quite a bit of the hype, which pretty much had the opposite effect that they intended. Like, you know, some suspense is cool, like let's see what is gonna happen and we can speculate, but you know, if you do it for way too long, people just end up not caring in the end. Like, who cares about the jailer guy? They just keep playing something else and they just lose interest in the Shadowlands overall. However, to conclude, I think the ultimate problem is that the expansion is just moving way too slow, and there have been a few storylines that I can't seem to happy with, such as the Sylvanas one, but I think people are way too early to make conclusions and say how the storyline flopped, how it is disappointing and everything just not living up to the expectations. Despite like 9 months passing, we're still very much so at the start of the storyline, and I think there is still a lot left to be explained. Quite a bit of culmination is supposed to happen, and I think there is definitely a lot of hope and room for improvement for the lore of the Shadowlands to ultimately turn out to be quite good. Thank you for watching. Check out the possible leaks of Sylvanas becoming the Arbiter by clicking on the screen, and also check out Doronsmovies Academy for videos on real world history and science. See you next time.